Javi Adi Madhava Kunjabi Adi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Adi Madhava Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasodhanandana Brajachandranjana Yasodhanandana Brajachandranjana Jamunatiravanam Chadi Iravanyacha Jamunatiravanam Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajachandranjana Nandana Brajachandranjana Jasodanandana Brajachandranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chaji Jamuna Tiravana Chaji Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jayo Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parividakacharya Astatarasatasti Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaur Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Would you like the book? I've got a book. It's an extra one. I brought my own. Canto 10, Chapter 40, text number 6. Eke tvakila karmani sanyasyo pashamam gataha jnanino jnana yajnana Jajanti Jnana Vigraham Eke Tvak Kila Karmani Sanyasyo Pashamam Gata Jnanino Jnani Jnana Yagyena Jajanti Jnana Vigraham. Yajanti Jnana Vigraham. Eke Tva Kila Karmani Sanyasyo Pashamam Gataha Jnanino Jnana Yagyena Yajanti Jnana Vigraham. Ladies. Eke Takila Karmani Sanyasyo Pashamam Gataha Jnanino Jnana Yagyena Yajanti Jnana Vigraham Eke Tvakila Karmani Sanyasyo Pashamam Eke Sam Tva to you Akila all Karmani activities Sanyasya resigning Upashamam peace Gataha attaining Jnaninaha pursuers of knowledge Jnana Yagyena by the sacrifice of cultivating knowledge. Yajanti they worship Jnana Vigraham the embodiment of knowledge. Translation: in pursuit of spiritual knowledge, some persons renounce all material activities and, having thus become peaceful, perform the sacrifice of philosophical investigation to worship you, the original form of all knowledge. Purport: modern philosophers pursue knowledge without bothering to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, they naturally end up with meager, if not trivial, results. So this is Prayers of Akrura. The scene is Krishna was taken to Mathura by Akrura, and then a number of things happened. Kamsa was killed. He released his mother and father from prison. Ugrasena became the king. Krishna received his Upanayana. And then mother and father, naturally, 12-year-old boy, they wanted him to go to school. And so Krishna selected Sandipani Muni. He was there for 2 months, came back, and he had promised, and he fulfilled his promise, to visit Kubja, and he visits Akrura. And Akrura is displaying his devotion and his wisdom. That's the scene. And he has a very clear understanding of Krishna Tattva and the means to move towards Krishna Tattva. So the previous verse was a very lengthy description about, there's similar to Kunti's prayers, some understand you this way, some understand you that way, and so forth. So he, in the previous verse, is describing he's knowledgeable. He's a pure devotee, and he's also very knowledgeable about, the different options that are out there that people use. And the previous verse is the karma kanda option, because it's within the Vedas. And, the same as we hear from Bhagavad Gita. They are worshiping him directly, worshiping Krishna indirectly, but they're followers of the Vedas, and ultimately, even that indirect is meant for him. As Krishna says, avidhi purvakam, it's done in the wrong way, or without proper understanding. Now comes Jnana Kanda, so Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda section of the Vedas. And the word Jnana is here several times in the verse. And Akila Karmani, all activities, sannyasa, they give them up. Now this process of, we're fortunate, we're very fortunate, we're given the summation of all Vedic wisdom through Lord Chaitanya's teachings. One of the principal sources of those teachings is Rupa Goswami, and he teaches us that giving up activities or giving up things, dravya, that has its relationship with Krishna is incomplete. But there are some people that do that. And I'll spend a little bit of time discussing. In the Dhyan Yoga chapter of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, there's this interesting verse that says, in the beginning of the Ashtanga Yoga process, one is involved in activity. And in the further stage of the Dhyan Yoga process, there's cessation of activity. And the explanation is, the goal is to fix the mind, of course, even in bhakti or Gyan or the Ashtanga Yoga system, the mind is very important. And if the mind is not peaceful, if mind is agitated, then it's hard to do Ashtanga Yoga. So the Ashtanga Yoga system requires, in the beginning, performance of prescribed duties combined with meditation. Performance of prescribed duties in the mood of detachment from the results. So Nishkam Karma Yoga is a given. Because the mature stage, they don't require to do anything anymore. Their mind is peaceful because the mind is impelling us to do things. Spiritual as well as material, certainly material. So there are people that are cultivating Ashtanga Yoga. If they're doing it properly, they're observing Nishkam Karma Yoga. They're involving themselves in activity, but without attachment to results, by rendering the results unto the Supreme for the purpose of purification of the mind, along with the meditation, which is also to focus the mind. But unpurified mind isn't going to focus. So they go together. Nishkam Karma Yoga and the meditation that's involved in Ashtanga Yoga, Dhyan Dharana Samadhi. As one becomes more mature in that Ashtanga Yoga system, which means the mind becomes more purified. Mind becoming more purified means it's not distracted by desire, because from desire comes activity. And material desire ignorant desire comes ignorant activity. So the Dhyan Yoga process, chapter 6, the beginning is activity. And in the second stage is cessation of activity. That means the Ashtanga yogi can do it. He doesn't have to do it. He can, like yogis would do, live on, air. Or not just live on their life air without even breathing, but they'll live on air and water or fallen leaves or something. And, they don't have desire. Like that's very elevated. And they sit somewhere in a cave or on a rock or in the Himalayas or wherever they are. And they don't do anything. Karma sannyas. And that's kind of the advocacy that Arjuna is indicating. Because Krishna is saying, you have prescribed duty. And he's saying, I want to karma sannyas. Go to the mountains and, give up my prescribed duty. And Krishna is saying, you're not eligible. If Arjuna's not eligible, then what about an Ashtanga yogi? But so cessation of fruitive activity is the mature stage of the Ashtanga yoga process. Here, we're getting an indication of the mature stage of the Gyan yoga process. So there are those that aren't trying for mysticism, they're trying for Gyan. There's an important verse found in Canto 6, Chapter 1, which Prabhupada calls the regulative principles of knowledge. And we have our regulative principles, but it's specifically for those who are cultivating Gyan, regulative principles of knowledge. And that's the verse, Tapasya brahmacharjena samena damena cha tyagena satya shochabhyam, that verse. And so there's those who are cultivating knowledge at a certain stage, not pronto, but at a certain stage of purification through Nishkam Karma Yoga, purification, because the fruit of Nishkam Karma Yoga is what? It's the mind becomes pure, and when the mind becomes pure, then there's the possibility of real cultivation of knowledge, not speculative knowledge, but knowledge of the Supreme, Gyan, knowledge of Brahman. And here, Akrura is speaking about going beyond Brahman to the personal feature. The word in the verse is Jnana Vigraham. Vigraham means form. Jnana Vigraham. The form of knowledge is Krishna. And they can engage in the mature stage, upasana. So, karma kanda, jnana kanda, then upasana kanda. So let's go to the upasana kanda description. In the Bhagavatam is wonderful. The Srimad Bhagavatam in Canto 11, Chapter 11, Krishna is describing to Uddhava how those who are cultivating bhakti may also give up or not be obliged to perform prescribed duties. That's the spontaneous stage of bhakti. And until the spontaneous stage of bhakti is reached, then one is to perform prescribed duties. And it's a fault if one doesn't perform prescribed duties. Like Krishna is saying to Arjuna, you have prescribed duty, perform it. Under my order, perform it. So performance of prescribed duty is necessary. Yet, as with the other two, karma kanda, jnana kanda, one may come to the stage of, not karma kanda. The meditation process, the knowledge process, gyan, pursuit of knowledge, and pursuit of realization of the personal feature. Anyway, Krishna describes the highest stage, who I consider to be most dear to me, are those whose minds are completely fixed on me and all their activities are dedicated to me. However, if one is not able to fix one's mind upon me, then two things he recommends. This is the bhakti process given by Krishna to Uddhava. Engage in Nishkam Karma Yoga and always hear about me. Because both are for purification of the mind. At least in the preliminary stage. In the more mature stage, it's beyond that. But purification of the mind so that the mind can be fixed on me. And when the mind is fixed on me in all circumstances, good times, bad times, and mix. When the mind is fixed upon me, then the door is open for spontaneous devotional service. And when spontaneous devotional service is attained, one may or may not, and there's all this detailed description of daily and occasional meaning like observing Ekadasi, because it's not daily. But one may or may not. And the perfected souls do, but they're not doing so out of obligation. That's Nanda Maharaj or Ambarish Maharaj were observing Ekadasi strictly, and they didn't have to. They're on another platform. They're on the pure devotional platform, but they didn't have to. They didn't do it to become detached and become purified, because there's all these benefits that come from observing Ekadasi or observing any other occasional special something. But they're on another. It's another experience for them, consciousness-wise. So, karma sannyas commonly, from the teachings of Rupa Goswami, it's not recommended for the devotees, particularly in the sadhana stage. You just give up activities and go sit in a solitary place and just chant. No, some persons, Haridas Thakur has that eligibility. But we're not to imitate Haridas Thakur and go in a solitary place and do Nirjan Bhajan. We're recommended to engage in proper activities. And yet another consideration for followers of Lord Chaitanya is the natural compassion of a Vaishnav that flows from the natural compassion of Krishna and Lord Chaitanya, that persons of this world who are in ignorance and suffering shouldn't continue. Krishna doesn't want that. And so one engages, as Prabhupada did, and he encouraged his followers, even without the stature of Prabhupada, to assist him in relieving the unnecessary suffering of the world by propagating Nama Sankirtan and the message of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam all over the world. So that's also cessation of material activity by engagement in spiritual activity. No, worldly people don't understand that. They think, or they see, their perception is, you're doing the same things we're doing, what's the big deal? But it is a big deal, because it's not material activity anymore. If, this is a consciousness factor, if consciousness is in the mood of being an assistant of Krishna or an instrument of Krishna, as he asked Arjuna to do, not just engage in prescribed duty, but beyond that, engage in devotional service under my direction. Fix your mind upon me and engage in devotional service. Mamana bhavavad bhakto. So built within Bhagavad Gita are these teachings, and then they're expanded further in the Bhagavatam. Here, the sequence goes further. Akrura is going to go on and describe like Kunti does. Some do this, and some do this, and some do that, and some do the other thing. And that's just fine. No, just because some do this and some do that, it's not, it's all one. Or yatamat tatapat, or, whatever path you follow, that's great. Whatever, it's something that's Vedic, that's beneficial. Then comes the but it's incomplete. And those that are following properly can become cleansed, and that means in the contact with bhakti, they can go further. We're having this discussion yesterday evening where it didn't have an answer. But how did Vishwamitra go from the stage of Brahmarshi, not how he went from a king to a Brahmana, from a Kshatriya to a Brahmana, that's clear. But how did it go from being absorbed as a Brahmana, having Brahma Tejas, to the path of bhakti? Or what was the event or the contact with bhakti that ignited his bhakti? And so the closest we could come to it, I was thinking some more about, it was Nityananda Pran's response. Gautama Rishi had a son. And Gautama Rishi's son, Shatananda, had become the chief priest of Janak. So Shatananda had a relationship with Vishwamitra. The commentary says, Shatananda requested Vishwamitra two things: go to go to Ayodhya and invite young Ram to see what he can do about the bow, but on the way, pass by my father's ashram, because my mother is a stone over there, and is foretold by Gautama that she'll become again my mother when Ram places his feet there. So, two things, Shatananda to Vishwamitra. So it's not, we don't know exactly the thought process, or was there the devotional element in Shatananda's request? We don't know. But for sure, when he came in contact with Ram, he also came in contact with Dasarath. And, Dasarath is a pure bhakta. Now, he didn't give him lessons in bhakti, but he had contact with devotees in Ayodhya. So perhaps that was the seed that sprouted in the course of their journey to kill Subahu and send Maricha out to the sea and go to Mithila and so forth. But Vishwamitra had certainly become clean, specifically clean of sex desire or control of his mind and senses, that with enormous endeavor, by a mechanical process, essentially, a non-devotional process. But he became qualified to become a Brahmin, a rishi amongst Brahmins. So that's dry wood that can easily be ignited. Easily. And it was ignited by, we can say, reasonably, by the devotees in Ayodhya, and then his direct association and service to Ram. Ram blessed him. And Vishwamitra became an elevated devotee. So, by various means, there's like rungs on a ladder or spokes on a wheel or something, and they all go to one central point. And Akrura knows what that central point is. It's love for Krishna, loving service unto Krishna. And there are other options that he's listing here that may help one approach that position. So we don't poo-poo those other processes. They're just incomplete. The demigod worship is incomplete. You don't poo-poo demigod worship. It's, although we know it's meant for Krishna alone, it's done without proper knowledge. They're following something, and that's what the previous verse is describing. They're following something, and it's done indirectly. And it has a process, a means of elevating them. Now it's done with a motive as well. They want something, and they get something by that doing that something. It's fruitive. It's not selfless, but it's elevating. It's part of the Vedic system for those that aren't ready to take shelter of Krishna. Give them something to elevate them, because they get something and they do something to get something, and it works, and that nourishes their faith, and that faith goes to the faith in the scripture and so on. The yoga ladder is there. Gradually, so faith should be, in Akura's case, is reposed upon Krishna, because he understands Krishna. He knows Krishna Tattva. And so we're getting like an array, a spectrum of Akura's Krishna's Tattva understandings. He's an elevated person. He's not a Brijvasi, but he has great regard for the Brijvasis, having been there and seen. And but he didn't go to Vrindavan. He stayed in Mathura and then went to Dwarka and did what he did in Dwarka. And he's a Dwarkavasi, resident of Dwarka. That's his mood. Pure devotee. Okay, so let's see if there's some discussion. 5 minutes after the hour. You had a long class yesterday. You sat here through the whole thing, right? Krishna Archana? You sat through the whole long class yesterday. Huh?
Morning. That was in the evening, Maharaj.
It was a long one. He kept going and going and going.
Oh.
When he speaks, can you understand? 50%?
I've got accustomed to the pace and the intonation, but there are moments where I struggle.
Guru Maharaj, even though I may say I'm on the path of Bhakti Yoga, and
take the mask off until I can hear you better. Path of Bhakti Yoga.
And even though I may, for instance, facilitate a Bhakti Yoga club on campus, I know that if I were to come to the stage of even Nishkam Karma Yoga, it would be a big achievement for me personally. So is it in that striving for dedicating not just the fruit, but the activity itself for Krishna's pleasure, is it that switches the knob from being a Nishkam Karma Yogi to a Bhakti Yogi?
That's a step. And then there's more than the activity, because you dedicate the activity because you're giving yourself, with the holistic picture of self. It's part of the self is the activity, but it's more than the activity. It's deeper. Mm-hmm. I am yours. Manasa Deha Geha. I am yours. That's the distinction. And within Nishkam Karma Yoga, there's levels as well. I'm detached from the fruit, but I want detachment from the results of my activities. There's a liberationist. This is what's in it for me, mm-hmm. Even though it's Nishkam. And so there's layers of that as well. And then, of course, in bhakti, there's layers of giving of oneself. You just keep going. There's no limit. Associate with the unalloyed devotees in Vrindavan, and there's no bottom to that ocean. But that is yes. The answer is yes, and then keep going.
So I wanted to link this to what we've heard from you about, first we are aspiring to become a human being, and Varnashrama is the stepping stone to even come to the
Accepting what?
Varnashrama is the stepping stone to even come to a platform of Krishna consciousness.
Yes.
So when we are speaking about becoming a human, we're not speaking about Nishkama Karma Yoga. That is still Bhakti Yoga. And the Varnashrama that is being referred to is still Bhakti Yoga.
It's a stage. It's an entry-level stage. And again, there's depending upon the consciousness behind.
Okay.
I mean, the author of the book, Shivaram Maharaj, says, I don't know about everybody else, but I know that I need to become a human. And I know that I need to live within that social structure that Krishna gives. Now, he's writing and involving himself in stuff that's really high at the same time. But, what's the eligibility for that high if I'm not here, if I'm not properly? So this is to help one become further qualified and further the stages, unfolding, maturing, etc. Okay. Someone else in the room here? Anybody? Okay. Anything online? No. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki